So, oh, there's Karen. Karen, did you have any announcements before we start?
So the main announcement I had is next Tuesday, August 9th, Kent Goulding and I are playing one of the Women in Backgammon learning sessions. We did a dry run today. So those are open to everybody and free. And the link is in an email I sent around today about the Boca tournament, which is coming up this Saturday. So a live tournament in Boca at the Beer Garden at 11 o'clock on Saturday. And we're still doing the Chouette Monday nights at Duffy's in North Miami Beach. So I finally found my records. So in the Monte Carlo Open, I won against Manny. As I said, I lost to Geir Pedersen from Norway, as a top player, and David Wells from the US, who's an amazing player. In the championship, I won against Arena Litzenberger and Phil Sinborg, a French guy, Olivier de Coulter, and then lost to Simon Barget from the UK, a very fine player. So those were some of the results that I got. Anyway, lots of play.
Okay, so I started recording, so let's get started again. We spent the last couple of sessions going over PRAT, position, race, and threat. And so I've outlined my the system I've been using, and again, it was, I think, embedded, or what you're getting from me is mostly developed by David Presser, who is a very fine player and has actually been on some of Karen's Women in Backgammon events, and is one of the top cube experts. And so we've been going over that, and there seem to be a number of people here who are new, so I'll go over very briefly, and again, what it is. And we're going to have basically a 3-point system, and there are four categories that we're looking at, and we're going to rate each category between 0 and 1. And the fourth one is a gamma, what's called gamma potential. We're going to rate that normally between 0 and 5. And essentially, we're going to rate all the 4 categories. If we come up with something 2 or above, we're going to double. And it's a take. If we come up with something 3 or above, it's a double and a pass. So we're going to apply that analysis, that tool, that systematic way of looking at it, and that's how we can come up with whether we should throw the cube or not, and whether, if we're having the cube thrown against us, whether we're going to take it or not. So we've gone over the introductory, the basics. I looked at some opening doubles, which I unfortunately forgot to record that one. Last time we looked at some situations in where we're going to double, but we don't have a board, any board strength. I like to go over those because it sort of highlights the other conditions that you have that you may take into account, or circumstances. And so this time I want to look at positions in which we don't have a race lead, but we can still come up with a double. And so there are a number of things that we used in the system that are important here. So for instance, this position. And let me just to remind you that for race, if we're ahead by 16, we're going to usually give ourselves a full 1 credit for that. And then if we're ahead by 8, it's usually a half, and proportionally so on. For the board, we're going to assign a value of our relative. It's really our relative board strength compared to our opponents. So we're going to assign values to our points that we have versus the opponent.
This is Kara.
Versus the opponent points that our opponent has. So for the 5-point, we're going to give a 0.75 to us. 4-point is a 0.5. 3 is 3, 2 is 0.3, 0.2, and 0.1. These are the basics of this. If I can get it over here. I have, here we go. I have in the spreadsheet, which is on the Google Drive for anyone who wants to take a look at it. So again, this range here is no double. Below 0, below 2 is no double. 2 to 3 is double take. 3 and higher is double pass. And the value of the points made is this. And we're going to take our points and subtract off our opponent's points to get the relative strength. And then the hit lead 16 is equal to 1, and then it's proportionate thereafter. So the idea of doing this is to sort of systematize your thinking on it. And to identify key things that are important and put it together in a way where you have sort of a simple comparison to something that's pretty complex, actually, in total. So in order to do that, we need to know how to evaluate each one. So I've tried to make the two of the 3 components or 4 components as simple as possible, and including the race and position. And the threats, the things like threats and gamma potential aren't so simple. They're not so exact. They're not so mathematically. We can't just sit down and apply some sort of mathematics to it and come up with a simple answer. But with a little practice, you sort of get a feel for it. And generally, if you have a feel for it, it's close enough. And you know, the idea is if you can see the relevant factors, you shouldn't make a big error if you can get a good understanding of them. So again, this is a model that is effective. But it's not straightforward. It's not like the racing formulas that we use, where that's pretty much automatic. If you go through the math, you'll be within one pip usually of the right decision, that's as simple as it gets. These can be simple at times, but not always. So let's look at some positions that aren't simple. And I want to introduce a couple of things that in applying the system that you need to know. So first of all, the position we have, just by looking at it, and we're yellow on roll, and any ideas? Take a quick look at it. Does anyone think this is a double or not?
It might be a double. It's an easy take.
Yeah. Well, let's look at the answer.
I don't think it's a double.
No.
No,
Go ahead. Who's talking? Is that Charlie?
Charlie, yeah, because you stripped the 8 point.
Yeah.
You'd have to roll a 1 or a 3 to cover the 5 point. And
yeah. Well, in terms of our what I've taught so far, we look at our position, and we have the 4 point, and we give that a value of 0.5, but our opponent has the 3 and the 8s, so we would give that a value of 0.4, and so we're 0.1, okay, which isn't a lot. We look at relays, we're behind in the race, so we can give us a 0 for there, so we're already at 0.1. Threats, well, anytime the black is on the bar, your opponent's on the bar, you have some threats, but we've only got what says 9 checkers in the zone. That's not so great. We can make this point, and that would be good, but black has a lot of time to come in. So the threats don't look all that astonishing, but maybe 0.6 or something like that a value. And then backgammon potential, anytime we got on the board and we have points and things like that, we have some, so maybe 0.2. So when we add all those up, it looks like we're up at 1. So this, if you just look at it that way, you say, well, this is no double, it's not even close. In fact, it is a double. And so you have to ask, well, what is it about this position? You know, if we want to understand position, race, and threats and make it effective, how do we have to interpret this position? So there are a couple things that are important here to think about, and in terms of using position, race, and threat. The first is that for using PRAT, any points that are made behind the anchor don't count in terms of the cube, in terms of the figuring out, you know, between 0 and 1 in terms of your board. So the right way to look at this is, okay, we've got 0.5 for board, but our anchor is head of black's points, and so we wouldn't count those points in terms of what we're getting for position. So the correct analysis for position here is that we're at 0.5. And so, you know, we start there. Now when you get into the threats of say 0.7 and gamma potential of 0.2 or so, 0.3, now we're up to, you know, 1.5 or something like that. We're still close. And so here, so what about race? Well, we're behind in the race, but there are certain cases where the race is misleading, what it shows is, you know, there's a weakness in the position that doesn't really fall directly into any category. But in terms of making sense of it and putting it into our structure, we're going to call it that, you know, the race is misleading. So if you just look at the pip count, you can say, oh, we're behind in the race, it's 0 for race. But that's not quite the case. And because black has made some deep points, and so you know, that makes black look like it's in the race, but it's really a weakness at this point, because these two checkers are kind of out of, you know, they're out of the game. The 24 and actually on the 22, they're out of the game. So you know, that represents a weakness in the position. It doesn't really fit neatly into any of the categories. So, but the way I interpret it is that, okay, the race is misleading. We need to adjust the race component of that. We could, I suppose we could adjust it in some other way, but I find it's the easiest way to understand it is just, you know, the race is misleading. You know, let's adjust the race. So what I try to do is say, okay, I'm going to add, if we put this here, now we're up 16. This is nearly the same. This is not quite a double, but it's more indicative of you know, the race. So in this position, the way to think about it is that, okay, we have half for board. We got, you know, 0.7 for threats, 0.2 or 0.3 for race, for gamma potential. But race, instead of being down 4, this is effectively equivalent to being up 16. So you may, so I would add something like 20 pips to our race just to adjust that component. Okay.
Gary, it's not really relevant to the way you're counting, but there are 25 numbers I counted that make the 5 point. So obviously the 3s and 1s, but you've also got double 4s and 6, 2 and double 2s and even double 5s. So after any of those 25 numbers, it's going to be a little bit hard for black to take. So
Yeah.
think about losing the mark at the potentials there.
Yeah. In fact, if we had made this point, this is now a double and a pass. Again, what we're trying to do is adjust, and that's one way of looking at but in terms of fitting it into our system, when we look at this and we look at, we went out had the race, we have a better board, slightly better board, even ignoring the 2 points. You need to make an adjustment somewhere, and you need to recognize the weaknesses of either your position or your opponent's position. And so here, there's certain weakness here, and the way to spot it, I found, is that okay, we've got these 2 points behind it, so I want to adjust the race. What Karen said is kind of like what's called O'Hagan's law, which I think it's mentioned in the Chris Bray book. But O'Hagan's law basically says if you have a market loser, you have more than 9 rolls, 25% of your rolls, which is 9 rolls, which would lose your market, then you should double now before you lose the market. And so what Karen was suggesting was, we got 25 rolls that make this point, and that's kind of a market loser. So that's true. That's another aspect of it. But I'm talking about the just how to adjust PRAT to get this type of situation to work. And so the idea is basically let's look at the weaknesses of the position and make the adjustment. So, all right, let me go over a couple more. Let's just before we do that, let me look at a couple of variations of this. And this is okay. What happens with the same position, but black's no longer on the bar? And how does that impact our decision? We've got all the same decisions, all the same situations. We've got the better board because we're ignoring these points. The race is misleading, so we really have an advantage for that component. But the threats aren't nearly as great because black is not on the bar. So in this, and the gammon potential is not as great as well. So that's enough to drop those components down, and now we're taking it below to a no double. One other variation of this. Now black is no longer the bar, so that again, the threats aren't as great because black is not on the bar. However, being on the ace point is still a pretty weak position. I already saved it. It's already, it's still a double. We've made our 5 point. So now our position is a full 1 advantage as opposed to 0.5. So the threats went down, but the position went up, and so now this is a double in a take. And again, this one, if he's on the bar, this is a pass. Yeah. Okay. I guess this is a similar position where the key thing is here that we don't count this to black's credit. So our advantage here on board is a full 1. The race is misleading because we've got 3 checkers behind our anchor, including 1 at the ace point. And so instead of giving 0 for race, we should adjust that for something. Maybe if I give 20 pips to something like that, maybe 15 because there's only 1. There was only 3 instead of 4 here, but it's still nearly 1. So we're already up to double territory. Black isn't on the bar, so we have threats, but they're not as great. We could put 1 here, but they're not as great. And gammon potential is still pretty good, but again, black's not on the bar, so it's not as good as it was. So, we're at 1 for board, 1 for race, maybe half or so or 40.4 for threats, and gammon potential is there at 0.3 or so, something like that. So we're up with a very solid double. and a bear take for black. Okay. Okay, one more in this similar thing, similar idea. In this case, black does not have the anchor in front of any of our board points, so these still count to our favor. So we got 0.5 and 0.2, that's 0.7. The race, maybe we had 15 to the race, so we're like half for a race, so we're up to 1.2. Threats, we're still there. 2 blots here, 3-point board. We only have 9 in the zone, so it's not that great, but they're still there. So maybe another 0.7 or so for that. Gamma potential, certainly with our 3-point board and two blots there, we've got 0.3 or so for gamma potential. So that puts us in the 2.5 range, which is a double and a take. And again, the idea here is that we should count something for the race category, even though we're behind in the race, just because the race is misleading with these checkers buried about here. If we move a checker here, so now we've got 6 checkers in the zone. Now we can give a full 1 for threats, even more for gamma potential, maybe 0.4. And now this is going to put us puts us much farther into the double category, and it's a bear take. In fact, if we move this checker up here, where now this builder can attack either the 3-point or the 5-point, this should be a pass. Yeah, and a fairly big pass. Okay, so now I want to look at some positions where, the 2 ideas here that in applying this method are that, okay, points behind the anchor don't count toward the, you don't count them toward the board component, and checkers buried deep into the opponent's zone, you should adjust the race component to reflect it basically. And it's not so much race as these checkers are not useful to black anymore. So we adjust that by adjusting the race component just to keep everything else consistent. Now let's look at some that's not the one I wanted to look at. I don't think. Well, look at this one quickly. We have some of the same ideas in that okay, we have a full 1 here for this board. This board is 0 because it's behind our anchor. And so we got a 1 for the board. The race, we're going to discount this, these checkers behind our anchor because they're sort of not in play anymore. So, I would add again 15, 20 pips, and so we're up to 1 or nearly 1 for the race. Threats, again, black doesn't have any loose checkers around. He's got a deep anchor, and our threats are really going to make the prime, and so we really have, I would guess maybe 1 for threats or close to it. So in gamma potential, a little bit, not so much because it does have the anchor, and but it's still there. So this is going to be certainly a double, and yeah, and it's a pass with all those things against it. But the key here is if you just look at the pip count, that's misleading because that's this. I guess the point is that this black's advanced pip count is not necessarily an advantage to him in this point because the checkers here are buried. And again, the position, our board strength is much better because we've got the advanced anchor, and this point here is not really much of a threat to us now. Okay. Yeah, so this is an interesting one where we don't have race and we don't have the other situations that we had before. And that, okay, black still has this point, and it's ahead of our checker. So it would count. So we're really up at 0.3 for board and 0 for race. Threats, there's a threat there here, and we've got 10 checkers in the zone. So we've got, certainly have some threats and some gammon potential. So any idea, is this going to make a double? Is it close to a double, or is it not even close to a double?
Well, it's close to a double. I think it's still a take.
Yeah. Yeah. And what do you think? And what's the weakness here in black's position?
In black's position.
Yeah. Yeah. So why? And we can.
Those checkers on the 2 point. He can't do any priming. He can blitz, but he hasn't really got enough checkers for that.
Yeah.
And and white's got one check. White has escaped a check. I think that's important, and black hasn't.
Yeah. Yeah. Black. Yes. White's escaped a checker. Also, black hasn't moved his checkers here. And if he does try to move them, they're under attack. So that's a big weakness too. So this is not quite a double, but it's close. And so again, you have to, PRAT gives you, I think PRAT gives you like 90% of the time, it'll give you very accurate. You've got to recognize certain weaknesses that your opponent may have, or that you may have, that don't quite fit into PRAT, and sort of kind of adjust for them. So here, this I think was a weakness. As Ray pointed out, this is also a special situation where a single checker back, and all we need to do is escape pretty much, and black is in a tough spot. And plus we've got 10 in the zone to make a nice prime here by making either the 5 or the 7. So those are kind of things that sort of fall outside the scope of PRAT, but which are very important. Okay, last one. There's one more I wanted to look at too. Second last one, maybe. Here again, no race lead. In fact, we're behind in the race. We wouldn't necessarily discount the race. Isn't necessarily misleading here. This is not a great spot for black, but I wouldn't really adjust for it. Do we have enough else going on here to get a double out of this? So when we look at board here, we got certainly the better board. We get 0.75 for that. Nothing for race. Threats. Well, it's a little weird. We're on the bar, but we certainly have threats. There's, if we get the 2 or something with an ace, black has 2 checkers back. I would probably give a full 1 for threats here. Gamma potential, you should be able to see that this could go very well for us. If we hit black or even hitting black here loose is going to give us, put black on the bar against the better board. We also have the 4 prime. PRAT doesn't really, we don't really take into account, the 4 prime, the priming factor. That's sort of a different, there's a different tool that you would kind of use for that, but it's still, it's of added value here that we have this prime. And then, part of the threats, we've got 4 builders, 6 builders here, or 5 builders here, really, that we, coming in at the bar, we're probably not going to, probably not going to be able to point on black here, but we certainly can hit him. Anything, actually any number coming in except for 5. And if we did get the 5, we'd come in with 5 here. And we're going to hit, we're going to hit black. Again, so what do we think? So what's the answer here? It is a double, yeah, double but a take. Yeah, if we, if we weren't on the bar, it was probably a pass. Yeah. Yeah. And again, this is just the threats here are overwhelming, and the gammons are overwhelming here. Just roll 5 numbers here, point on 4, and give the 4 prime. I'm sorry, the 5 prime with black on the bar. Very strong position, and then an ace will pick up a second checker at any point. So again, these are ways that sort of fall a little bit, but you can adjust. If you apply PRAT and then adjust for circumstances, you'll come up with the right answer. Now there's one more I want to look at. This is it. Now where to go? I did all those. All right. I can't find it now. Let me, but it was, I think it was something like this, where there's something else going on.
You only have 14. You had 1 black checker off.
Oh yeah,
the board there.
there's a black checker missing. And the point was we didn't have race here. Yeah, this might do it. So the thing here is okay, we've got a full 1 for the board, and maybe slightly less than half for the race. There are no adjustments for the misleading race. And threats, we have some threats, I guess, making the bar point. Those are pretty good threats. But the thing here is the weakness in black's position is the awkward stacking on the 6 and the 8 point, which makes his position very weak. And so that's that doesn't fit into PRAT, but it's a big weakness in this position. I think this is a double, even if we do something like this, where we have, well, it's close. Okay, where you have no doubles. Yeah. So we have no race, nothing to speak of, and we've got it's a decent board, but it's 0.75, and no sort of minimal threats right now in the way that we normally think of it. But the weakness of black's position is so weak that it pushes us up to the point where we should certainly be considering doubling here. Okay, so any questions on that? That's kind of the that's kind of what I wanted to go over for position race and threats. At least for now, we're going to come back to it later. We're going to stop and take a look at certain other cube positions where there's a very strong reference position that you should know. This isn't covered in the Chris Bray book, but there are a couple of very basic reference positions that come up all the time for holding games and for what we call it, I guess, after the hit. If you've gotten a late hit, your opponent has some checkers off, at what point do you recube? And so we'll go over those 2 situations. And then after that, I want to return to PRAT and the other situations and look at match score considerations. we've pretty much tried to focus completely on, money games or, and that's kind of the basis for how you decide. And so you need to start, the best way to do it is always start with the money game analysis, and then try to adjust your analysis for the match score. So we're going to talk about things like, well, the free drop, which most of you should know. And we'll cover that. And then there's a very easy formula that actually I think Art Benjamin developed along with David Presser to adjust for match play, which will for match scores, which are really really powerful and will really improve your cube decisions if you can kind of get it down. And it's very. I was just kind of overwhelmed by it. I think it's a wonderful thing. So we'll go over that in future sessions. So with that, I will stop the recording and